All right, we got it. We got it squared now. He should be joining any moment now. We get this started. All right, let me know if it's coming through. I sent an invite twice. Instagram is playing today. All right. So I don't see your request, but I just sent another one. There it is. Dang, that was a journey.
Yo, what's good, man? God damn.
That took forever. I'm over here sweating and everything. I came from the gym, hopped in the shower, sweating, trying to figure it out. And it's not.
I don't know what's going on.
Anyways, good to see
good.
you.
Yeah, you too. You too, man. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's all loud and clear. We all good.
All right.
All right, bet. I did the intro already. You want me to go ahead and do another intro, or we want to get started? What you want to do?
Oh, you want to give an intro? I don't need to hear myself again. But no, it's all good, man.
All right.
I'm here.
All right, say no more. So, we're gonna get right here and get started.
Okay.
As everybody knows, this is Dr. Madhere. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Madhere, yeah.
Madhere, yeah. He's a cardiothoracic anesthesiologist, a father, an author, and a mentor. He attended Xavier University for undergrad and then Harvard for his medical school education. And then we're here with him tonight. We're going to get to know him a little bit and then talk to him as well. All right. With that being said, I just want to say it's honestly an honor to be here with you today. I'm like real humbled. And it's crazy because every year, like around January time, I go to Barnes & Noble and I buy like a whole bunch of books and I like read it for the year. And this year when I went in there, this is what I picked up. Wow. And I didn't even know you had Instagram. I didn't know you even existed. I thought you were just like some old black guy that wrote a book.
Yo, as you can see, I'm literally a dinosaur, right? You know, I don't update my app too much, so you know.
Yeah, so I was like, it was crazy when we actually started talking about the interview, and it was you, and I was like, dang, I actually read that book like back in March. Let me go and refresh on that book so we can talk about it. And then now we're here. I feel like I know you personally from reading this book, but we're gonna get into it all later.
Yeah.
So my first question to you is, so what made you want to be interested in becoming a doctor? Or what made you want to go into medicine?
I guess it was like, you know, it was a couple of things, you know. I guess I could say like my steps were ordered, but I always like to tell people, especially for the sake of this live, like the biggest thing for me was just, you know, at an age when, you know, the influence is real, like actually seeing black doctors. My story was, I was raised in DC, Washington, DC. I went to this high school called Banneker High School, which was basically like the only magnet school in the city. And it was across the street, even though it was in the middle of the hood, like it was across the street from Howard University.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was the biggest blessing for me because like part of the requirements like to graduate was we had to have like 200 hours of community service. So like around that time, you know, it was crazy in DC. Like DC was like, you know, that was still like heavy, you know, in the crack era. We were on the tail end of the crack era, but it was still like popping around there.
Right.
And, you know, the biggest thing for me was like, yo, I was just trying to do something where, you know, I just was trying to avoid trouble. Like, because I'll tell you, like, I remember I used to like have to catch like public transportation to go home. And like, you know, you could either catch a bus or catch a train. But you know, there was kids, there was like local high schools around, you know, kids always getting in fights and stuff. Yeah. So I was really like, you know, I blended into the, you know, the environment, but, you know, I just, you know, I wasn't no gangster. You know, I mean, I always like, I knew how to defend myself, but I wasn't no gangster like that. And I was just like, man, I don't need to be hopping around town trying to volunteer no places. So I was just like, let me just go across the street, get this volunteering done. And, you know, my position was like an orderly. Like I was the person involved, like responsible for pushing around food trays and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what happened was I just remember like pushing around the food trays, and the great thing about Howard was that like you have tons of black doctors, like it was normal.
Right.
And up until that moment, I had never seen like black doctors just like in abundance like that. So, when I saw that, you see the team, you don't see the medical students, you see the interns, you see the residents, you see the chiefs, you see the attendings, and everybody's black or somebody of color. And it was powerful, man. It was powerful for me, and I was just like, damn. Well, I mean, all these people are doing it. They were out there making decisions. So I was like, yo, like that looks like something like this cool. Like I just looked at black doctors in positions of leadership, and it just inspired me, like in a way that's indescribable. And so then I was like, okay, this is tangible.
How old were you back then?
I was 14.
14. So you were like a freshman in high school when
Yeah.
you started this.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And what's wild is I live in the DMV, but you know how the DMV is. Maryland, Virginia, DC is all around the same place. And it's still like rough. Like you can get caught up very, very easily in like things you're not supposed to be doing. So I definitely feel you're coming from with that. Like if you're not careful, one wrong turn down the wrong street could mean something completely different than what you wanted it to mean.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, back then, I mean, and DC has changed a lot. It's changed a lot from the time I was, a kid. And I guess in a good way in terms of crime, but it's still Chocolate City, but it's not like it was back then. That whole area around like U Street, that whole corridor was like, it was live. It was live back then, so it's changed, but definitely back then it wasn't nothing to play with.
Gotcha. All right, so my next question is, throughout medical school, you got introduced to a variety of different specialties through rotations. What made you decide on anesthesia?
Yeah, this is an interesting story too. So when I initially got to medical school, I thought I was going to be a neurologist, right?
Really?
Yeah, because I had done some research in college at Morehouse School of Medicine.
Okay.
We were doing like neuroscience research. We were looking at like, substantia nigra pars compacta, basically looking at the dopaminergic neurons, in rats. So I was just like all interested in that heavy. And so, it's just like, whatever you're exposed to, you're like, okay, I know I want to be a doctor. I was like, I'm gonna do this. Yeah. And, but I had really never had any like live experience with real patients. And so it wasn't until like, during our first year that we actually got an opportunity in between our classes to start shadowing, things, different specialties that we may be interested in. And I just remember being in a neurology clinic, man. And I was like, oh, I'm in trouble.
For her.
Yeah. I just knew like at that time I was like, and don't get it twisted. Like, neurology is extremely important, when it comes to stroke patients, but a big portion of that practice was like special needs and special needs children. And, I would never, make a joke of that or make fun of that because, it's extremely important. I just found out like the very first day I had this special needs kid and I had a tie, you go on your first clinic visit and you got your tie on. I had my tie, I had my crispiest tie on, white shirt. And this kid just like drooled all over the tie and he vomited on it. And I was like, yo, I'm not about this life, So then I switched. So then I was like, nah, this ain't for me. And even that, outside that, like just doing clinic, like I just knew clinic wasn't going to be my thing. And I actually had this period in med school. I was like, damn, I was doing okay in my classes, but I was like, oh no, like, damn, I don't even really know if I like to do clinic for the rest of my life. So, then I was like, yo, I'm going to switch to like a surgical subspecialty. And then it wasn't until like my third year, like I had like shadowed a little bit in the operating room. I thought it was cool, but you don't know what time it is until you really start like rotating with the residents during your third year. And I was like, oh hell no, I can't do surgery either. I just didn't like there's a structure to it. Yeah. That that it felt kind of like militaristic. That I didn't like, and I like getting up early, but not that damn early to round on patients. Yeah. So, but that was the biggest blessing for me because after that, what ended up happening was, I was holding. I remember it was a case. It was an open bowel, and I was holding a retractor, and I was just standing there like just looking in space, and then there was an anesthesiologist behind the drape. He was like, "Man, what you doing down there? You don't know what you're doing down there. Like, you don't want to do that." And he was a cool guy. I remember his name. His name was Dr. Holiday. And, I love this guy, he was you know, anybody went to Howard around that time, they know Dr. Holiday, just real like boisterous personality, big time personality. And he was just like, man, come behind the Drake when you get a chance. So he took me under his wing, and it was like just a very big influence for me, because he showed me how the physiology blends with the medicine in an acute situation. And then so from there, I was like, okay, I could do this. But even then, I was just like, I need patients to be a little bit sicker, you know. So I was like, I really got really hyped for the really big sick patients. Like that was my thing. So at that point, I was still like, yeah, I probably still want to kind of maybe just stick to like critical care. So I was like, yo, I'm gonna do anesthesia critical care. Like that was my thing, you know, just subspecialize in critical care. And then that kind of like led me on a different path. So I got into like an anesthesia residency. I went ahead and thought I was going to do critical care until like my first night of like my ICU rotation, my MICU rotation.
Yeah.
And it was like speaking to family after family about like the prognosis of those patients and, you know, dealing with the emotions of it. And I was like, I'm the type of person, like I put my all into a patient and I wear like my emotions on my sleeve.
Right.
So I was just like, this ain't gonna be it either. And then from there, I was like, yo, I love the anesthesia, but I was like, I want to take care of sick patients, but I can't do critical care. So the next best thing, which fell in line for me, was cardiac.
Okay. That was maybe one of my questions down the line, but we got to that real quick. A little extra question. You think you'd have done the long hours of standing with surgery? That's my only thing with surgery. I just feel like you're on your feet too much, and I'm like, my knees and my back hurt. I don't know if I can do that for that long. How did you feel about like the long standing when you're doing surgery?
Well, I ain't gonna lie to you, man. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, as a medical student, like, a lot of what we were doing was there was a lot of scut work. There was a lot of scut work, and we were getting pimped, you know. But we were getting pimped mostly by the attendants, you know.
Right.
And so we really, I would say, we was in the operating room, but my experience, I wasn't in the operating room heavy because, you know, you have all the junior residents and the interns that's trying to get in there. So when you're a medical student, like, you know, you're going to get in there, but they ain't going to let you do nothing. If at best, they're going to let you hold a retractor. You know, if you're somewhere and they let you, you know, do a stitch, then that's a blessing in itself. But I know at Howard, it wasn't like that, you know. So now I definitely wasn't feeling the standing up. Yeah. And I definitely knew early that, you know, surgery wasn't for me once I actually really got my teeth into it and really started diving into it. Okay.
So my next question is, what other specialties like did you like heavily consider when you came down to crunch time? You're like, I gotta go with like my heart here. I gotta pick one. Which few were you seriously like, considering? You mentioned surgery, obviously, but were there any other ones that you like?
Nah, that was it. Like it was neurology at first. When I came in, then my third, like, you know, after that I was like, I'm gonna switch to a surgical subspecialty. And then it was like during my third year, after I rotated through surgery, I was like, that ain't it. So after that, it was either anesthesia. I was gonna do anesthesia critical care or medicine critical care. And I always tell people, like, you know, when you're trying to make your decision, like, you just gotta go with like whatever just feels natural, you know. And for me, like, I remember in my rotations, like, I excelled at anesthesia. Like, to me, it was fun because it was like applying all like the basic science stuff that we learned during, you know, our core science years and applying it in a live situation to a patient, you know. So there's only two things that did that for me. And that was either anesthesia or just like pulmonary critical care, which I would have had to go through medicine, you know. And I just remember like me doing clinics, I was like, ooh, can I do enough clinic to get to, if I chose the medicine route, would I be able to withstand enough clinic to be able to get to pulmonary critical care? And I was just like, nah, I'm just gonna stay with this anesthesia.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Can you tell us the role of an anesthesiologist in the OR and in out of the OR, pretty much? Like what are your roles?
Yeah, like in the OR, it's basically like, I always like to tell people, it's like you're like a manager, right? And you're basically, your goal is to basically put out fires. Like that's your primary job. Like that's what hospitals pay you and keep you around for. And when I say that, I mean this. Like, everybody's like, if you're interested in medicine, you're gonna hear a term called systems-based practice, right? So a lot of system-based practice deals with how do we get a patient from the pre-operative area to the intraoperative area to the postoperative area, home, right? And there are a bunch of systems that fall along within that realm, right? And then you have you have nurses in that's part of that realm. You have like hospital administrators that are part of that realm. You have surgeons that are part of that realm. And when it comes to making sure that a patient does well, the anesthesiologist is like the last line of defense, right? So there's all these like checkpoints, you know. If you can imagine, it's almost like going to I don't know, if like you're traveling or something, right? And when you travel, what do you have to do? You have to like pull your wallet out, put your information in, so you know the airline knows who you are, the United States government knows who you are, everybody's checking your background. You're not getting on that airplane, you know, until like you're checked and it seems like you're safe. The airline and the airplane is safe and all the instruments, all that checked out. It's kind of like the same thing when a patient goes through that process. So there are a bunch of areas that can be missed before you even get to the operating room, right? So an anesthesiologist's job is to basically act as like the gatekeeper and make sure, okay, this patient is completely optimized for surgery, right? And we have to take into account all their comorbidities and create a good anesthetic and to create a good anesthetic plan. And if there are questions, particularly there are cardiopulmonary issues, like we address those questions through further studies, right? Whether they're pulmonary function tests, whether they're echocardiograms, whether they're chest x-rays, EKGs, whether we want to send up a stress test. We gather all that information, and then once we know that the patient will be safe, that we're optimized up for surgery, then we say, okay, boom. We create our plan, now they're ready for the surgery. So now we're ready for whatever that comes during the operation. So that's really why we get paid. And we really don't get paid to put people to sleep, right? You can train a monkey to put somebody to sleep. Yeah, we get paid to make sure patients wake up safely, right? And everything else after that is just a bonus.
Gotcha. So then with that being said, how often do you guys collaborate with like nurses in comparison with like other physicians? Because you were talking about how closely you guys monitor the patient throughout the whole thing. And obviously nurses spend the most time with the patients before they enter the OR and everything. How often do you guys collaborate with them to make sure like everything's in accord?
Are you talking about pre-op nurses? Or are you talking about nurses? Pre-op nurses? Yeah, so most of the time, like I'll give you an example, like in my practice, like we have nurse practitioners and we have physician assistants. And their role is basically to help triage the patient, right? So you know, we've trained them to like, you know, look for certain things. So by the time I see them, which is the morning of the procedure, I pretty much have like a skeleton, right? And it's almost like, I like to compare it to, you know, for anybody who's done like, you know, rounds. If you're going on rounds, if you're in med school and you're going on rounds, like when you're a med student, like your attendant already knows the plan, right? What he wants you to do is like sift through all the BS, like the bullshit, get through all of that, like, and give him the meat and potatoes so he can create a good plan to get the patient to the next step. So that is the role of our nurses and our nurse practitioners in the preoperative setting, to make sure like they sift through all the paperwork or the electronic medical record, give me the meat and potatoes about what will potentially delay this procedure. And then if there's a question, they call and we create the plan even before they show up the morning of. Now, of course, like sometimes things get missed, right? So like if that happens, then, you know, I'm not a one to cancel a procedure, you know, but I will delay a procedure if I feel like a patient is at risk for major morbidity and mortality.
Okay. And then my next question is, so a lot of people get caught between anesthesia, general surgery, and internal medicine. Can you talk through the three and why someone may want to choose anesthesia versus general surge versus internal med? Like what kind of characteristics like kind of differentiate the three?
Okay. No shade, man. You got me on shade with something. Nah. Like again, you just have to know the type of person you are. You know, like major shout out to all the surgeons out there. You know, they're very much needed. They're very special people. You have to be willing to, you know, perfect your craft. You know, particularly with your hands, and the type of procedures you do. You active, right? So if you have a huge let's put it like this. You can have patients, like if you are a surgeon, your patients will always remember you. So if you have a big ego, like surgery is excellent for you, you know, because if you have a big ego and you want your patients to remember you, that's for you, right?
Right.
If you go into internal medicine, you're probably a little bit more detail oriented when it comes to just knowing your patient through and through. And there are a bunch of like different aspects of internal medicine that you can go into. You just have to figure out what it is that you want to do. There's so many subspecialties in internal medicine. So that is the one huge benefit of internal medicine over anesthesia. The thing with internal medicine is that, a lot of like colleagues that I know in internal medicine, they don't get to do a lot of procedures. So a lot of the times people who go into internal medicine, they get paid for thinking, right? So, and which is, again, it's extremely important. It's very much needed. And there's no shade to surgery because all physicians, like we all think, like everything in medicine, you have to think and you have to be able to display leadership qualities by creating good plans.
Right.
But like with medicine, like it's more of like you are really like digging into the chart, learning about the patient, making sure you're following up, especially if they have poor access to care, with like social work and all these other avenues to improve a patient's quality of life. So you can have a potentially a very long-standing relationship with that patient, right? Whereas opposed to anesthesia, anesthesia is basically two things. It's physiology and it's pharmacology, like in an acute setting. So with that, like it's basically like this. If you don't do anesthesia if you got an ego, because that's out the window, right? Number one, because most of the times the patients are not going to remember you. If you're an anesthesiologist and the patient remembers you, 9 times out of 10, it's for something very bad, right? Now, I do cardiac anesthesia, so we do big cases, and so if that one out of 10 that the patient remembers you is because either you saw them in pre-operative, you have like your name precedes you, right? So they may have heard you from somewhere. So sometimes I get that, like patients may know me because I've treated so many patients now. Oh, you such and such. You took care of my uncle, my aunt, my nephew, whatever. Or patients are like in extremely large amounts of pain in a perioperative setting, and nobody can fix their pain. And then you come in and you'll do something like a nerve block to basically numb their pain, and they'll remember you for something like that. So. But in the most intense setting, anesthesia is literally pharmacology and physiology at the highest level in an acute setting. And you're basically one of those doctors where you feel like you could save somebody else's life. All you need is IV access and airway equipment. And, that kind of separates you from most other doctors, because when it starts popping in the OR, what ends up happening is even the surgeons, like patients start crashing, they stepping back like this.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's like they're there to operate. Like a good anesthesiologist is gonna when the stuff gets hectic, like you could be like mixing up the drugs and chefing it up while the surgeon is working, and you can be handling stuff. You tell them what's going on and what you're doing, and when they trust you, they're not even like breaking a sweat because they know you got it. Okay. So and when the fear really comes in those acute situations, and that's where you really see when you start seeing the white of people's eyes, because they like, oh, people just freeze. Like as an anesthesiologist, you could come in there no matter what the situation is, and that's how it goes. Like a lot of times, I get a phone call, whether it's in a pre-op, the OR, pack you, and I'm getting a call, come to room whatever, come to room 6, stat. I don't know nothing about the patient, right? Because people freaking out. So when I get there, I already know it's going to be a live situation. And when you come in and you're supposed to put out that fire.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you for that. That was an in-depth answer. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a break from my questions and take a question from the audience. And someone said, what's your biggest advice for an M1 looking towards anesthesiology? She has an open mind. The person has an open mind. But what's your advice for an M1 ultimately set themselves up for residency?
Okay, I think I'll do the first question. Actually, that's kind of like a combined question. For somebody who's interested in anesthesia, in anesthesiology, the thing about anesthesiology is that it's still very competitive, right? So of course I would tell like anybody, because of that and because of the nature of the of how like residencies are chosen for a lot of students, the biggest thing I would say is like tests, practice questions, USMLE, 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 USMLE. You know, step one, unfortunately, they still use that as a key separator in terms of like who gets into what. Um, if you don't do as well on step one, it's not the end of the world, but you gotta, if you didn't do as well on step one, step two is extremely important because that's exactly what happened to me. Like I didn't get the score I wanted to on step one. And so I was like, I looked at my score. I was like, it's below the national average for, you know, people getting into anesthesia. So I was like, yo, I have like another year and a half to 2 years to try to bang out step two. And so I banged out step two, and here I am. So I always tell people, like, unfortunately, the biggest thing is your test scores. And, you know, when you take a step one, it ain't just anesthesia, right? You got residency to learn about anesthesiology, right? But your goal, just like it's for med school, your goal is just to get in. And so, like, the biggest thing is just being the best doctor you can be. Because no matter what specialty you go into, like, it's all medicine. Like, so when you know your physiology code, when you know your pathology code, when you know your pharmacology code, when you know your histology code, most of the time, assuming you don't have a test taking issue, you know, you can bang out those tests, and then the doors open up for you. So once you make sure that that's your priority, which is like practice questions, practice questions, practice questions, get ready for step one, then it's just exposure, right? So if you're in an institution that has like a surgical program, you know, they have some sort of anesthesia affiliated program with it. So that means that, you know, being humble, and introducing yourself to people, like just getting out of your shell, like even if you're a shy person, to like just get out your shell, introduce yourself, say, hey, I'm M1, I'm interested in this specialty. Do you mind if there's a way I can shadow you, that I have an opportunity to shadow you? I really want to do this. I made my decision, and so on and so forth. And endear yourself to people to make them want to help you. Not everybody's going to be willing, right? But you know, sometimes you gotta force your hand. And even if it's not somebody in your hospital, a lot of times, like, you know, like I have people reach out to me on the gram all the time, and I'm always willing to help, you know. And that goes for most doctors who are in it, who've been through it. Like, they're the same way. Like, if you can't get like exposure through your hospital, you know, sometimes it's like, okay, well, you know, what should I be reading? Are there textbooks I can be reading to familiarize myself? You know,
Right.
or just ask the questions. Like, no matter how stupid that they may seem, you know, you just be like, okay, well, you know, it's a completely different science. It's different from everything else in medicine. So, you know, you got to know about the machine. You got to know about your pharmacology. You got to know onset of action, duration of action. You got to know side effects. Like, all those things, that you'll see further down the line. But again, the earlier you get to the exposure to it, just like everything else, the more you'll understand and pick up the language. And then after that, it's a wrap.
Gotcha. I hope the question was answered for everybody that asked that question. And then we'll take one more from the audience. This was sent early in the day for you. They said, how do you deal with microaggressions from colleagues?
Yeah, so like that was the thing. Like, so remember I was telling you, like, you know, putting out fires, you
Yeah.
know. To me, one of the challenges with being an anesthesiologist is that, you know, again, you gotta check it, you gotta leave your ego at the door, right? And it's not like you just deal with one person, right? I give you a perfect example. In the model that we have in my practice, I could be covering, if I'm not doing like a heart, like a major cardiovascular case,
Mhm.
I could be covering 4 rooms, right? So that's 4 patients that I got to know everything about them, right? That's 4 either nurse anesthetists that I have to, you know, work with.
Right.
That is every preoperative nurse that I come into, like, that deals with the patient that I have to work with. That's every nurse in every circulating room, you know, every OR nurse, circulator, scrub tech, you know, PA who works with the surgeon, right? The
Right.
families. So on the average day, I'll interact with like 50 to 60 people. And not everybody is going to have like a positive attitude, right? So your job is like is like you learn how to like not only put out the fires with patients, but you learn how to put out potential issues with people, right? So like, and not everybody's worth your energy. Like, oh, I got big energy for people, but not everybody. Like sometimes like negative energy. If somebody's negative, that could consume you and make your day like a bad day, right? And you already, yeah, and you have to keep in mind that it's like patient. It's the patient. You put the patient first at all times. Like as long as you put your patients first, like when you put the patient first, if somebody's in the wrong, yeah, that's when you go in on them because like you have the backing to say, no, I'm putting the patient first. So I'm not gonna let like, you know, somebody just roll the patient back to the operating room without me having seen them and giving them the best anesthetic plan possible, right? Or if it's something like, you know, or if it's a surgeon having a bad day, you know, it depends on what they say.
Yeah.
You know, if they say something crazy out of line, like if they say something like that I deem is like relatively offensive, then a lot of times with me, one thing I'll just do so I don't like, you know, I take a deep breath and usually I'll just ask them, do they mind repeating themselves again? You know, and a lot of times, you know, that kind of puts them in the atmosphere like, oh, okay, well, maybe I did say something crazy and I don't want to repeat myself again because, you know, I know this dude, you know, keeping receipts. So, you know, it's just a fine balance that, you know, it takes time when you get into practice because when you're in medical school, you're learning about the science and the art of medicine. And like, no matter what specialty you go into, like you just learn about the art and science of like managing people and dealing with people and all their personal issues that they may bring into the workplace.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then we'll get back to my questions. So back to the basics. How long was your training for anesthesia for anyone who out there who doesn't know?
So, you know, of course, after like the 4 years in medical school, I did 4 years of residency and then I did 1 year fellowship. So that was 9 years total after, of course, college.
Okay. And what does a typical day look like for you at work? So you come in the morning, how does that go? Or what time you wake up to start there?
Yeah, so for me, I think like it all depends. The days depend, right? Okay. And I love my life. I love my job. I'm blessed, man. Like my average, I would say my average work week is between 40 to 50 hours.
Oh wow.
But it varies, right? Because what'd you say?
That's not bad at all.
No, it's not bad at all. I ain't gonna lie to you. It's not bad at all. Like even like and I say that like for me, because like a rough week for me is if I have to take call twice in a week. And the call is like we do 24-hour coverage, right? Okay. And like I give you an example. So there's like I'm one of the 5 like cardiac anesthesiologists in my practice. So we take call every 5th night, right? But the way we balance that out is that we take a lot of vacation too. So like I get a week of vacation almost every month. Dang. So yeah, I know. So yeah, that's what makes it nice. Now not every practice is like that. So yeah. I don't want people to get it misconstrued, like think, oh yeah, that's the life. Nah, but I got a really good situation, you know. But I take call every 5th night, and the call is like, it's not like because we don't do OB, it's not like I'm in the hospital for 24 hours at all, right? So it's literally like, okay, like let's take for instance, I was on call Tuesday. We were done with the cases by like 8:30 at night. So I went home. Like I didn't stay in the hospital. Went home, saw my wife, saw my kids. You know, woke up the next day, and I wasn't. My post call day is never off, but I'm still out the next day because you know we have like this tiered number system to where we say, okay, who's on call, who worked the latest, you know, and it's like kind of like this boots on the ground thing in my practice. So I was out the next day by like maybe like 10:30, 11. So yeah, so it allows me, you know, time to, you know. I can't drop the kids off at school, of course, because I got to wake up early. So every day, my typical day, I usually wake up about 5 to 5:15. And I'm in the hospital between 6:15, 6:30, depending on how many patients, how many cases I got. Yeah. If I'm doing the heart, then yeah, I'm usually in between. If they're in the ICU, I try to get there between 6:15, 6:20, just to give myself a little bit, you know, more time to, you know, find out about the history. Yeah. But other than that, you know, 6:15, 6:30. I'm seeing the patients. We're ready to roll in the operating room by 7. And that's it. Once the case is done, it depends. if I'm doing the heart, once the heart is done, what ends up happening is like once we extubate the patient, we drop them off in the ICU, then I'll just pick up other patients from my other partners, right? So other people will go home. So yeah, I would say like my average work week is about between 40 and 50 hours.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you said, that's not for everybody, but that
Yeah,
does
yeah,
sound amazing.
yeah.
All right. So my next question is, what are some common misconceptions and stereotypes that you've heard about anesthesia? I mean, obviously we touched on one earlier that people just think anesthesia is putting people to sleep and then waking them up. Obviously, it's not like that.
Yeah.
But what other misconceptions have you heard about anesthesia? Or stereotypes?
Yeah, like people think like anesthesiologists are lazy. I would say that.
Everybody says that. You just,
Huh?
I said everybody says that. You guys just get
Yeah. You hear that, and I think
Yeah.
now don't get it twisted. You got some lazy anesthesiologists out there, but you got some lazy doctors out there. Like you have lazy everything in the hospital. There's a subset of people that's just lazy, man, and you have some. Not everybody's good. Like not everybody's going to be trained. Not everybody's training is going to be the same. Not everybody's going to be on your level. But everybody knows a good anesthesiologist. And I like to tell people, anesthesiologists are judged when it's time for the action. Like, because the thing is, it's kind of like in an operating room, like it's just like how surgeons are judged, right? Surgeons are judged by, how fast they are, right? How efficient they are, and B, their complication rate, right? So if a surgeon, if he goes somewhere and he has a bunch of complications and he's slow as hell, everybody's gonna say that's a bad surgeon, right? When anesthesiologist, it's kind of not like that, right? Because anybody can induce and put a patient to sleep fast, right? And like waking up a patient, like based off the context sensitive halftime of a drug or how long an anesthetic gas is, like that's not really good to like judge. Nobody's gonna judge say, okay, it's not a good anesthesiologist.
Right.
Like when anesthesia is like when the stuff hits the fan, like when it's time to go, when it's live, and you can come in the room and basically know how to manage the patient, like save the patient's life, basically, right?
Right.
And like transport them to the ICU or to their next, phase of care. That's what separates you, or like your procedural skills. So we do procedures like we do nerve blocks, and like if a patient wakes up free of pain, like of course that's what people know they're anesthesiologists for, or like the nurses will know, like they'll be like, okay, this one does good nerve blocks. This one doesn't do good nerve blocks. It's kind of stupid and silly like that, but that's how it works, right? And so, or like when you do what we did in my practice, like we're really progressive, like so we're open hearts. Like historically, like a lot of open hearts, those patients would go to the ICU intubated on a ton of drips, on all types of craziness. But myself and some of my partners, we've been able to like progress the practice to where we were dealing with like old school, hardcore, rigid surgeons. But we're all so good. So now we extubate our hearts on the table. 9 times out of 10, those patients are pain free, and the patients get out the hospital much quicker. So the hospital sees that, and the surgeons we work with see that. So our name speaks for itself, throughout the hospital.
And they trust you a lot more too.
Yeah,
because that comes with the work. That sounds good.
Sure.
For the audience, go ahead and keep sending questions you have about anesthesia or the healthcare. I'm going to jump into some questions from the book. As you guys know, Dr. Madhere is an author. I have a few questions from that. We'll get right into that right now. So my first question is, what was your goal in writing the book, and who were you hoping to impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the purpose for the book was basically like, it was a series of events that basically happened, the book that you're referencing to, I don't know if you touched upon it on the introduction, but it's called Pulse of Perseverance, 3 Black Doctors on a Journey to Success. And I wrote it with 2 of my best friends.
Yep.
And like, we all came from like similar backgrounds, like growing up, we didn't grow up together. We all met in college. And like, when we first got to college, basically we was failing, like everything, so, we found a common bond with each other just off the fact that, we all grew up in like similar environments coming up. And so that was our bond that we kept with each other. And then like when we thought like we was in college and Cass was like not doing well on the MCAT. And like I remember like my best friend Pierre was like, yo, like if we make it up out of this, we're gonna have a story to tell. And so that's where the origin of the idea of the book came from. Like we always knew like once we made it, right? You know, because like I know for me, when I walk into the hospital, nobody, I don't really see nobody that really looks like me, or especially when I first started working. Like I was just like, okay, I'm the only one. And there's this narrative about like young Black men in general that was like, yo, I was like, we just gotta tell a story about how hard it really is to like get to these spaces, about why we don't exist in these spaces. And then so that was another reason. And then the third reason was like, you know, all like the stuff that was going on with like, you know, I remember when Tamir Rice got popped, you know, then it was like Trayvon. Like I just felt like we had to do something. Like we was like, yo, we really got to get a story about what it is to be a young Black man in America, just trying to do the right thing. Like people think like, oh, they'll say like, it's like cliche, just do what you have to do the right thing, do the right thing. Yeah, that's easy for like my kids now because they're in a situation where they're growing up with resources and finances and protection and access, and not having to like go to schools where they got to deal with like, you know, fighting every day, you know, like avoiding like, you know, banging and shooting. Like they don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. That's easy, right? But what's not easy is like when you're a young Black man and you're in these environments and they're telling you, oh, just go to school. Right? So it's just like, yeah, like, okay, but you see them 30 dudes up the block I gotta pass every day, like, you know. So it's that was like part of the story. And then just to let like America know, like in general, like the process and the come up of trying to reach these higher levels of success, you ain't playing fair, right? So when you come from like, you know, poor environments, underprivileged schools, lack of resources, like to ask that kid to say, okay, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a professor, a PhD, like, you know, the deck is already stacked against that kid, because you know that kid will be judged against the kid who went to the top private school in their particular city, right? They're taking a standardized test against kids who were prepared, right? And the building blocks when it comes to education, there's so many gaps that are missed along the entire spectrum of education that by the time you may make a decision to go to medical school, like if you really want it, like you're gonna have to work that much harder. And your working harder is literally just playing catch-ups from gaps that you may have missed during your primary education.
Absolutely. And what I found was, I actually read your story completely, and I read Pierre's story. I haven't got to the third one yet. But what I found most interesting was that, I mean, me growing up, I'm in the healthcare field as well. I felt like to be a doctor, you have to have like this perfect background. They all got straight A's. They came from like good homes, and everything was cool. And like the stars kind of aligned for them, and they became doctors, and they're all smart. But then reading your story and Pierre's, it's like that's not how it was whatsoever. Y'all came from complete opposite to where you are now. And then I remember specifically one story you talked about when y'all was at Xavier. I forgot. I think it was Pierre's roommate's boyfriend or something like that. That night had almost changed everything that police hadn't driven by. Yeah. And I was like, that's crazy. It felt like I was like watching a movie when I read that part, and I was like, nah.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing about it, right? And it's just like the pitfalls, you know, because I always tell people like I'm blessed. Like I was, you know, I was a good kid. You know, I was a good kid. And I had I had a very strong father, like very strong mother, like, you know, they stressed education, but they couldn't help the circumstance of what we were surrounded by. You know, like you can't protect your kids at all times, you know? And so growing up in those environments, I just learned to adapt to whatever my environment was, to blend in, right? So, you know, like whatever it took, like, you know, whatever it took, like, I'm just gonna leave it at that. Whatever it took, that's what I did to blend in. And so some of those things that you bring along with you, because that's basically what like your environment kind of taught you. And so, you know, we like, without getting too much into that story, we almost made like the biggest decision. Like I could not be standing here and be a statistic, you know, if, you know, the trappings and the dealings of the streets would have got to us. So, but those are things that, the average person, doesn't necessarily have to deal with. And you have to have, the right people at the right time with a certain level of maturity to be able to come up out of that. And a certain amount of like intestinal fortitude too, right? So, and everybody makes mistakes, it's just that some people, when you're black and you're in this country, you pay an ultimate price, like there's no floor if you do succumb to the BS. And unfortunately, that's how it's been for an extremely long time, whereas if you don't come from that, or if you come from a different environment, like, I always get people like this when I argue with, like, not argue, but debate with colleagues. I always tell them, because I work with like mid-levels who have like rough upbringings, but they weren't black, right? And they had challenges in high school, and, they might have been arrested before and all these things. And I'm like, if I would have been arrested, I wouldn't be in my position.
For sure.
Right? Like the odds of me getting something wiped from my record where somebody doesn't like recognize like me as like my humanity as a black man, like that's not an option for me, right? Whereas if you're Caucasian, like your floor may be like a police officer or fireman, right? You're still able to like contribute to somewhere in society. Whereas if you're black and you have a record and you don't have like good access to resources, you ain't no floor. Like, right? So it's like, it's the bottom. Like the bottom is like you marginalized, caught in the traps of the criminal justice system, and you out of here, right? So, and we see that so much, and it's played over and over again. So again, I just say, man, I'm blessed, I'm blessed from that perspective.
All right. So my next question is, in the book you spoke about your upbringing, your immigrant parents, adapting to the streets of New York and DC. How do you think that affected and shaped you into becoming the man you are today and the position you are today? Both of them.
I think it's extremely important. Like, like my parents are Haitian, so like I have that humility, like learning that, they first generation, like I'm first generation American, and like, like talking to my dad and my mom and like knowing, like, people see, the kind of like situation that Haiti is always in. There's always like, issues with the country, whether they're from natural disasters or infrastructure or political issues. Like, so I knew, like, in the back of my mind, like, like I knew what real poverty was, right? And, but outside of that, just like, I think like growing up in those environments, what it did was it helped me deal with like situations of being under pressure. Right. And how they say, like, like pressure busts pipes. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, so if you're in one of these fields where patients are coding, like every person who goes to medical school does not react well when patients start coding. It's just a fact, right? Yeah. You see it, like everybody's not built for that, right? And it's not like a diss. It's just like for some people, they just don't respond well to that kind of pressure. Whereas for me, it's kind of like I was used to like growing up, like being surrounded with that, whether it's pressure of like outside environments or even like in school and like learning that, damn, okay, I just failed this test, but this is what I still want to do. Like, I'm gonna put all the pressure on myself to like go get it, and just like nobody's gonna outwork me, right? Just to be the best. And so that kind of like put me in the position that I'm in today, where like I feel like I have a career where I provide a lot of value for what it is that I do. And then I get the respect of my colleagues for what it is that I do. And that's all I pretty much need.
Right. And then my last question from the book is, what's one message you hope everyone takes from reading this book? If you had just one message that you wanted to impact onto somebody.
Yeah, like I think the biggest thing is like, like if you're in one of these spaces, and I don't care what it is, like I don't care if it's medicine, I don't care if you're in law, I don't care if you're an entrepreneur, I don't care what it is, man. And you really like, you come from a separate, unequal education system or environment. It's like your job to give back, and giving back doesn't necessarily have to be financial, right? If you're able to do that, absolutely. If you're in a position to give back financially, absolutely, yeah, that's part of your charge. But another part of the charge is just like just keeping it like being like an active mentor. So for me, I'm an active mentor. Most people who reach out to me, like they know, like can't nobody say like, oh, Dr. Madhere is not an active mentor. Like I that gives me fulfillment in life, right? Just helping as many people as I possibly can before, you know, my time on this earth is done. Because I know how tough the process is, and I know how difficult the process is when you don't have a mentor. And the role that mentorship plays, you know, mentorship can really change the trajectory of somebody's life. Because that's what a mentor is supposed to do, right? A mentor is supposed to be like, yo, all right, this is what I did. I did it like this. This is why I made my mistake. So everybody's coming behind me. They're not going to make the same mistakes that I made, you know, because I'm going to give them that game so they're that much more prepared when it's their time to step up. So, like, give back in a multitude of ways, whether that's, you know, whether that's like mentoring, like, you know, setting a good example for, you know, the kids who are coming behind you in your family, you know, whatever, in your school, in your church, you know, in your community, just being unapologetic for who you are, you know, because again, we don't see, like, it's not enough of us in these spaces to where, like, we see each other, like, okay, like, damn, like, somebody can see me, like, people see me be like, damn, yeah, you can do it. Yeah, I know, you know, we can relate, so I know I can do it. And so that's what I try to, like, tell people: be unapologetically you, and definitely always keep it 100, keep it professional, but give back as much as you can.
All right. For the audience, go ahead and send in your last few questions. We'll take one from here. Say, outside of location, what are important things you look for in residency programs?
I want to, like, again, you know, the type of personality I have. I was trying to go to a residency program that had everything possible in terms of, like, my preparation from when I was going to be an attending. And I tell this, it really doesn't matter what specialty you go into. Like, don't take the easy way out of residency, right? Because when you become an attending, there's nobody else there that's holding your hand. Like, you're supposed to be the hand holder for everybody else. Everybody's going to make the assumption that you know what you're doing, right? So you never want to put yourself in a position where you box yourself in, like, to where you limited, like, yo, I ain't really comfortable dealing with these kind of patients, or I ain't really comfortable dealing with that. Like, when you're in residency, your opportunity, you have an opportunity there to, like, learn as much as you can, like, in that short period of time, because it goes really fast. Like, you got 4 years, and then, if you do a fellowship, more years. But for the most part, you got a finite amount of time to learn as much as you can, get exposure to as much as you can, and just do as much as you can in that time frame. Soak up all the game and knowledge from your attendings, because that's what they're there for. They're there to teach you, you know. Sometimes you got to force it out of them, but do it, right? Now, that doesn't mean, like, don't be prepared, right? But that means, like, read and then be prepared to, like, ask questions based off what you read, not just expect somebody to just spoon feed you all the information. That's how you'll become a better doctor, and that's how you'll challenge your attendants to stay on their toes. So those are like, you know, the biggest things I would say for anybody who's going into residency. So I'll give you another example. Everybody in residency has, like, you know, you have to fill out these, you know, you have to write your case logs and see what, you know, describe what kind of patients you saw. So let's say if you're doing anesthesia, you're doing emergency, you're doing surgery. Let's just put it like this. Let's say your residency requires a minimum of 50 central lines.
Right.
All right. When you're in residency, don't do 50 central lines. Try to do 100. Right. If they require 100 arterial lines, don't do 100 arterial lines. Do 200. Right. Bronchoscopies, like double lumen tubes. You know, like everything that, you know, you may not necessarily get exposure to. Just try to do it extra and do it double the amount of the minimum requirement. So that way you get a lot more proficient. And again, don't shy away from tough, challenging cases, because again, that's what's going to separate, you know, you when you actually get in the field of practice. And you know, you never know when you're called. Even if you plan on going into a practice where, you know, it's an outpatient facility and you're seeing tons of patients who are, like, relatively healthy, you never know when you're going to get that patient when stuff goes left. And you need to be able to respond appropriately to save that patient's life.
Got it. And where did you do your residency, by the way? I never asked.
Henry Ford Hospital, Detroit, Michigan. I did my residency and fellowship there.
Gotcha. All right. And so we're down to our last question, our final question. And we always ask this. So here at the Village Doctors, we kind of pride ourselves in saying that we're a village, meaning that it takes a village for us to achieve our goals or help us achieve our goals. Who do you consider as part of your village that's helped you to be where you are today or helped you achieve the goals you have today?
My village, of course, I always, shout out to my parents, that, without them, I wouldn't be here. And of course, I got a beautiful, loving wife. She holds it down. I got 3 beautiful kids. They, she helps, those little rascals run around, let me do me. And of course, all my friends, like my day ones, most of my friends are day ones, they know who they are, outside of my brothers in the book.
Yeah.
And, because like, you also need time to just break away from medicine and the type of person you are, so you gotta surround yourself with positive, like-minded people. Like, I don't like negative people in my circle. If you're negative, you got to get up out of here. If there's any negativity, if it ain't coming from me, I need people around me who's going to uplift me, who's going to help me get to that next level. So I like, just rolling people who inspire me, so that's my team, and everybody else, I really, just,
Circle small.
For sure.
I get you. All right, so that's all of our questions for today. But before I let you go, I know you're a big sports fan. I got quite. You a Wizards fan or you're a Knicks fan for basketball?
Knicks.
Both
Everything New York. Everything New York, man. Everything New York.
Y'all gonna make the playoffs this year?
Who, the Knicks?
Yeah, the Knicks.
It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough. But we got if Kemba Walker come back healthy.
You don't sound you have any faith in them.
Huh?
You don't sound you have any faith in the Knicks. You just like, I don't know.
Nah. The reason why is because there's a lot of teams that did their thing this offseason. Like, I think the Bulls gonna be legit this year. I think Boston had an off year last year. I think they're gonna be tough. There's a couple of teams. I think like Charlotte with LaMelo Ball. I think LaMelo Ball is nice.
You're a LaMelo fan?
LaMelo?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's nice. He's gonna be nice. And so I think with the Knicks, I feel like they need more talent. Like they're not winning no championship. Of course, that's all they're gonna be.
Yeah, that's
like Brooklyn. It's all gonna be Brooklyn or the Lakers. But so I mean, I know the Knicks ain't winning no chip. But
yeah.
I'm still a diehard Knicks fan, tooth and nail.
As long as y'all make the playoffs, the city's gonna be lit. So just make the playoffs.
Yeah, but that honestly, I ain't gonna lie to you, that ain't good enough for me. I need him to like really acquire better talent. That's what I like the Kemba trade. Like the Kemba trade, that was
the Kemba trade.
Kemba. They got Kemba. Yeah, Kemba Walker.
They got Kemba, but he out. He on his way home.
I don't see. That's what I'm saying. That's what I said. If Kemba comes and plays like Charlotte Kemba, we're gonna be nice,
that's
man.
Different. That'd be different.
Yeah.
Celtics Kemba, but we'll see.
But we'll see, because you know what? Because we still got D Rose, right? We still got D Rose. D Rose gonna give you a good 15 to 20.
Yeah.
RJ, it's like Julius Randle. He cool, but I'm not a huge fan.
Really? He's our best player right now.
Huh? I know. That's why we ain't winning no chip. Right?
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, like when your best player Julius Randle, as much as I love him, like he can't be the best player on the championship team. Like he's good, but he's not like a superstar. So they really need this year depends on RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett got to get busy. Like he got to show that he's like official. If he takes like a big step and Kemba comes back healthy, I feel like we can get to the second round of the playoffs.
Okay. Someone says he shoots too many threes, but
who's that?
That's where the NBA is going now.
Yeah, the NBA is going now.
Like exactly, everybody's shooting threes.
Yeah.
So, we're gonna see. I just want to see where your head's at with the NBA. If you're a Knicks fan or Wizards fan, it's a shame. It's okay. You can come back home anytime you want. The Wizards will be waiting for you.
Are you a Wizards fan?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they suck.
Oh, please don't do that. We're not.
I mean, I'm just saying. Y'all not going to the playoffs this year, dog.
What?
You're not.
I'll do you a favor. When we make the playoffs, I'll send you a special DM of this conversation about me telling you they're gonna make playoffs. Matter of fact, I'll do you one better. We're gonna get a better seed than the Knicks, and I'll let you know afterwards too.
Yo, I'm gonna put it to you like this: if the Wizards make the playoffs before the Knicks,
right,
I'll buy you playoff tickets.
Say no more. Maybe I'll come back for a second interview. How about that?
I bet.
All right,
bet.
Say no more. All right, I look forward to it then. All right, thank you very much.
No doubt, man. No doubt.
All right, have a good night.
You too.